This is Ryan Claringbowl interviewing Val Edwards. It is June 13th, 2019. The time is 9:30. We are at the Monona Public Library. All right, Val, thank you so much for coming. We'll start you off with, why do you want to share your story?
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. And I'm excited to be invited to share my story because I think it provides. There was such a blended experience in my experience being part of the Monona community that I think it's nice to be able to bring out how different aspects of the community intersect with each other.
Great, thank you. And tell us more a little bit about yourself. When and where were you born?
So I was born in 1965 in Door County, actually in Sturgeon Bay, and that is where I was raised. And my dad was the superintendent of one of the state parks in the county, so it was sort of an interesting and a little bit unusual. So one of the things I value about Monona is the small community, which very much reflects the type of tight-knit community that I grew up in.
Thank you. And can you tell us a little bit more about your parents or your grandparents?
Sure. So my dad actually was also born and raised in Door County, so the roots ran deep there. My grandparents immigrated from Germany and had a small hand-woven rug business that they ran. So it was just an interesting sort of intersection of life up there with the tourism and the agriculture, and sort of very representative of what we see around Wisconsin. And then, like I said, my dad was the superintendent of one of the state parks. My mom actually grew up in West Bend, which is kind of a suburb of Milwaukee, and she was a nurse, and so ended up moving up to Door County. And I think I very much was influenced, and I think it heightened my awareness of Monona's proximity to Madison, that she was very aware of the isolation in Door County and the close-knit sort of small town nature of the community, as opposed to where she grew up, which was West Bend's not a huge city, but with its proximity to Milwaukee certainly has much more of that feel.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any influential extended family members that you kind of interacted with during your childhood years or even now?
Really, it's so interesting because our extended family members were more family friends. I think the people that were influential to me, because we didn't tend to get together with our actual relatives very frequently. There would sometimes be a family reunion, but it wasn't like an every year thing. I didn't see, I did go to school with some of my cousins, but not necessarily in a way that was a huge part of my life, but we had family friends who played such a huge role and that we addressed as aunt and uncle. And I would say that they very much were the ones that were influential and and again, I think this is something that then I experienced in Monona, is how really your friends and the connections you make can be such a support, and so have such a major impact in your life and become such important people to you.
Great, thank you. Do you have a formative personal experience that you'd like to share? Is there something that happened early on that you feel like kind of influenced who you are today?
Well, I think that a formative personal experience sort of early on would just be sort of the nature of growing up in Door County, is that you have a summer job quite early in your life. So at 11, I had a job, and that was a part-time, not very, I guess, demanding in terms of personal responsibilities really role. It was more of a gopher thing. But then at 13, I got a job working in one of the shops up there, and I had that same job until I was out of college. And I think that having that responsibility, being given more and more responsibility over time, and then understanding that I had the responsibility to the people I worked for to, be accurate with making change and representing their business well. But more, what came to me was that there were these people who were having their vacation, that they had these aspirations for what that was going to mean to them, and wanted it to be relaxing and all the things that then I felt like I was responsible for helping them have the experience that lived up to their dreams. It was their opportunity to, get away from work and sort of the things that were their burdens or stressors, and you wanted to deliver on that for them. So that, I think that for me, that was such a formative experience in terms of how I looked at every job I had after that, then, in terms of who I was serving.
Okay. And what family interests or personal hobbies did you partake in?
Well, there was a lot of time spent running around through the park like it was our big backyard. And so it's interesting going back now how well I continue to know the park, and it all kind of comes back when we go out hiking on the trails and that and off the trails and that kind of thing. But we also had horses, and so then that's another thing that my parents got me a pony when I was, oh my gosh, maybe 10, and I got a horse when I was 12. My sister and I both got horses when we turned 12. And then that was sort of a turning point in terms of responsibility, because again, we had jobs because we grew up in Door County. We were also expected to contribute towards the expenses of caring for our horses and paying vet bills, and I'm sure we didn't really put a dent in it, but every cent that we had that we could, we put towards that. And then we showed our horses, and if we wanted to have, a special piece of tack or whatever at a show, we did have to come up, for anything beyond the very basics. It was, it was our responsibility then to get that, which made total sense, but then also helped us become very clear about our priorities, sort of, and it fine tunes your focus when it's coming out of your pocket, and there's this pot, and if you're going to go beyond that, it's on you. So,
Do you did your horse have a name?
Shara was her name.
Okay.
So yeah, she was fabulous and sassy, and it seems like every single pet I own sort of reflects back my own attitude. I don't know if I inflicted. I'm gonna say she was 5 when I got her, so it's like not all that sass wasn't all me.
Any influential school experiences?
I think that, it was such a small school. There are only 2 things that really stand out for me as being really striking. Well, one is in 2nd grade on my report card, so I love that I have evidence of this. It says to my parents that I am very reluctant to talk in class. I'm quite shy, and that if they could encourage me to, share my opinions and my views at home and blah, blah, blah. But I keep pointing to that to my mom as a success story, but she's a little skeptical about, she's not so sure that was really successful. But so interesting that awareness was there. And wow, until I became a librarian, actually, and felt like I had professional responsibilities that I needed that public speaking was a part of, really struggled. And I still do, depending on the circumstance, struggle a lot with being shy. But there was something very much that it was like, no, if I'm going to be good at my profession and I'm taking this seriously, then it really doesn't matter if I'm blushing. It doesn't matter if I need to pull myself together, and this is part of what I need to do to excel. So that was interesting. But then also, I remember in high school, there were 2 teachers who really taught me about testing ideas and relying on your found knowledge. So I was a big novel reader, but if you read historical fiction, even if it's really a bodice ripper type book, you get that background. So in a history class one time, I went on and on answering an essay question about the feudal system in Britain, and he was just like, well, but it was just the background to the type of romances I was reading at the time. And so I thought, you really can't dismiss people's reading experiences. And then the other one, I had an English teacher who, if no one was answering a question, would call on me because he knew I would just toss something out, and it wouldn't ever necessarily be what he was looking for, but it would give him something to go from, and he would just be like, all right, I'll just say something now.
Well, do you recall, or I guess, do you know your favorite book growing up?
Growing up, it was, well, picture book, Blueberries for Sal,
Okay.
because I used to go picking blackberries with my dad.
Oh.
So Val and blackberries and Sal and blueberries, and we never saw a beer. But I was always afraid we would, though. So that was definitely the favorite picture book. And then there was a book about, oh my gosh, Black Penny was the name of it, and it was about a horse.
Yeah.
And it was, oh my gosh, it's such an old book. But there were kids who wanted this young horse. I don't remember if it was a pony or if it was just a young horse. But and someone mean owned it. Like the neighbor who wasn't nice owned the horse, and then they had to try to get the horse away. And there's the point where the horse isn't being. It's very much like Shiloh.
I was gonna say, it sounds like Shiloh, but with yours. Yeah.
And well before Shiloh was
Right.
written. But yeah, it was. But oh my gosh, yeah, I loved that book too, and read it probably 20 billion times.
All right. And so when did you come to Monona?
So I came to Monona for the job at the high school. So I was the high school librarian for 17 years. I was hired the 1997-98 school year. Such an exciting, oh my God, I loved that so much, an exciting thing. And so that's when I feel like I sort of started being part of the Monona community, because really almost immediately I had opportunities and invitations to participate as a volunteer in the community. So gosh, it couldn't have been too long after that I was invited to participate on a hiring committee for the library director here at Monona Library. And they hired a man whose name I can't remember now. He wasn't here a super long time. But that was my first
John Seary,
opportunity.
probably.
Yes, correct. First opportunity to sort of move beyond the job at the high school and this within the school district and out into the community and meet people. And what a fantastic opportunity. Once you start meeting people in a community, that's when connections start happening. And then we moved into the school district, maybe after I'd been there 6 or so years. It was in the early 2000s. We moved into the school district then, just to be closer to things that were happening.
Okay. So if you came to the area because of your job,
Right.
did you visit prior to accepting the position?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we lived in Madison
Okay.
already, so I didn't move to this area for this job. We had moved to Madison in '88 for my job for my husband from Illinois. So really shortly after we were out of college, we moved to the Madison area, had some jobs in Madison, figured out what I wanted to do with my life with my history degree, and went to library school and got my teacher's license. And so, so we were in sort of the local area, but not in Monona really until I was hired at the school district.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about the neighborhood that you lived in?
So we lived in, I don't even know what the neighborhood is called. We lived like 2 blocks from the library. We lived over on Sioux Trail, right up from, I don't know what, it's not the Sioux, it's right, but anyway, right by, just up from the Dream Park and by the Little League baseball fields, which is fantastic. Okay. Again, like a prime location to sort of hear the community's activity and kind of know what's going on. We knew when it was Little League season, and we could hear that from our back door. And like I said, I'd probably been working at the district for 6 or 7 years at that point, and moved into an area where the then treasurer of the school board lived, and just met neighbors right away and had connections. And this doesn't reflect well on me, but when we looked at the house, I said to the owners, what other students live on this block, on this street? Because I wanted to know who my neighbors might be. And and none did at that time. So it was, I was like, oh, that's kind of like, we wanted to be close, but a little distance is nice too.
Yeah. Did you find did you ever find that your job kind of blended in with your day-to-day life living in the area?
Absolutely. Which is one of the things, it's one of the reasons we moved in too. That actually, yeah, that's the thing that I think is most exciting about Monona. I've given all this thought to how tied together and connected people can be. And what I found was that I loved was how my relationships with students worked when I saw them where they worked outside of the school day, or ran into them when we were, both using the library here as patrons, or, both waiting in line at the post office. And when you see each other out of context, and boy, the relationship really changed when they're your server at a restaurant and that kind of thing. And it's so important that how they're treated and valued in their roles, and then how they see and recognize what you're doing in your role when it's switched, and to have that run both ways in terms of who knows the answers to the questions and that kind of thing. So, and then meeting parents. So when I had opportunities to serve on different committees for the city, or did different types of volunteer work, and you'd meet parents of students from school, and yeah, it was really nice how that just ties you to a place and makes those connections and improves then everybody's experience, I think, when we're back to the sort of daily grind and work of learning.
Yeah. Your time in your neighborhood, when you left, had your neighborhood changed at all in the time that you had been there?
There were houses that sort of were starting to be, I think some actually were sort of flipped, did that and got spruced up a little bit. But I don't think that the makeup of the neighborhood changed much. It had a nice mix of young families and growing families, and then retired people, and that stayed pretty stable the whole time that we were in it. I feel like really nice. The Dream Park was finished before we moved, but there's always those things that you experience, though actually that didn't change, but were just so lovely. Annually having the 4th of July celebration just down the street, and those types of things. But yeah, it actually feels like there were more of these traditions that just kept occurring that were actually really very cool.
Well, since you mentioned that, what Monona festivals and events did you and your family attend?
Yeah, really, mostly I think it was the 4th of July thing. We would come occasionally to different events at the library, but we didn't tend to go to stuff like the Parks and Rec always put out things that we were like, ooh, the moonlight snowshoeing kinds of activities, but we didn't do it. But we always just loved that opportunity was there.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't really take full advantage, that's for sure. But I would say one of my favorite things, this isn't an official community thing, and I'm guessing it still happens. I love seeing the field that gets used for soccer next to the Dream Park, the one that's right across from the library by the gazebo. I loved seeing families come out, and all the kids, and the men are playing soccer, and it's and it makes it not just a sport for kids, and it's such a well-used space. To me, that's the success of Monona, is how well used its spaces are. The newest thing that we just screeched in on the early end of was the dog park, which now we have a much friendlier dog we would take full advantage of if we were still here, but we would sneak over when there were no other dogs so that our naughty dog could take advantage of the dog park.
What is it about the 4th of July festival you think that made it the event that you would consistently go to?
Yeah, I think it was, first, the wife carrier race.
Okay.
was always entertaining. Oh my gosh. One time our adult nephew and both our twin nephews and their significant others were up during that festival, and one of them, so brave, actually were practicing, thinking about entering it. They're practicing in our backyard, and it's, oh my gosh, it just provided so much entertainment. But sort of the carnival and seeing the kids out, the craft fair, there were just so many pieces of the community that come together at that festival. There's so many things offered that appeal to such a broad spectrum of people. And then firefighting is like a historic family occupation on both sides of my family, my parents' families. And so I loved that that was a fundraiser that you could make a donation to the firefighters as you went in, and we knew some of the firefighters, and it just was the kind of thing that made you appreciate the services that you get from your city in so many ways. The park and that, being organized, and the firefighters and just everybody that was out. So
Besides that festival, what other things did you and your family enjoy doing while in Monona?
Well, we really appreciated how close our proximity to the bike trails were. So
Okay.
we would bike a lot, and oh my gosh, do we miss that? It's just so lovely to be in a place that, and then also really all the green space. And so a lot of walks to the bait shop, loving the view that you can see, Lake Monona, and going down to the community access, public access for boat launch, that kind of thing. Just, all the different types of spaces that are around town. And frankly, this school district, we went to tons of different school district events, because that, that's an obvious entertainment when you're in the high school. So the musicals and plays and sporting events and that type of thing. So that was a lot of what we sort of actively participated in the community, more than some of the programming that's available at the community center and that type of thing. And like the films in the pool always sounded really interesting. There's so many things, but we did not enjoy those as much. But being able to get out and walk and be in the parks and get easy access to bike trails, that was big.
Okay. And you mentioned your profession in the school. And how did you choose? Being a school librarian, was that kind of instantaneous when you entered the library program, or?
That actually, before I ever entered the program, so first it took me a long time to understand that being a librarian would be what I would really, really want to do. I didn't know so many things that I had no idea how librarians came to be. I didn't know there was a library school. And then when I finally figured it out, and everybody that I was friends with growing up were like, it was such an obvious thing to them, like, maybe someone could have tipped me off, and maybe someone could have told me how this happens, because I didn't know there was a library school. And I'm like, and where were all my career counselors? But, and I actually worked in the library in my college, and still I didn't understand what the path was. So when I was looking through the phone book at graduate programs, trying to get ideas of what to do with myself, while I was in a secretarial position, which actually was a lovely position, but just not keeping me busy. And hit on library school, I still didn't know that there were the different types of librarian that you had to pick. And so when I called for information, the first question was, I'm going to run your battery down. The first question was, well, what type of librarian would you like to be? And I'm like, I don't know what you're asking me. And so then she listed, public academic school, and as soon as she said school, so this was a phone, just an information gathering phone call to the school. As soon as she said school librarian, I was like, that is what I want to do. And then she said, well, you have to have your teaching license. And I was like, well, I'm going to go do that, and then I'll get back to you. So it was interesting, because that first informational phone call, it took me 2 years to get back to the point where I could get in library school.
What accomplishments are you most proud of?
So this seems like such a gloaty thing, but in 2006, the library at the high school got an award for from the National American Association of School Librarians for their collaborative library program. And I am very proud of that. But because it's not my award, it was about the teachers at the high school that I worked with. And, their recognition of how we could work together for their students' success, and then the roles that they took in building part of their curriculum to take advantage of the library resources. And it was when they still do this. They were doing. They had just started doing document-based questioning as part of their instruction, and we were working together through a program at UW Whitewater to build our original source documents for that. And they just invited me in and allowed me to take a role really on equal footing with them, and we built that. And so to me, like, that's just such a testament to
It's
that
fantastic.
staff.
Yeah.
And I loved Monona Grove High School. Is the best. So
What is one thing you would want people to remember most about you?
hopefully that like that energy to keep looking for the next improvement and working to implement change and bringing people along, and looking for partners and affiliates to support that work, and making sure that as many voices are heard that are going to be impacted by a change, and that people are invited to be included in those types of opportunities. I think.
Okay.
Sort of that team building thing, collaboration.
Okay. I know you've been a big part of the library, serving on the library board for how many years?
Oh my gosh. I have no idea. Maybe 10?
We'll say 10.
Yeah, could be.
10 or more. What's your... Well, first off, I guess, what made you want to be on the library board?
When I started, I was the school district's representative
Okay.
to the board. And so it was really, so to have that voice, and I felt like that was very important. There's so much opportunity for one organization to have an impact on the other. And so to see people have an understanding of how that would work and what the different goals are and how they intersect and that type of thing. So that was how I started being on it. And then as it went along, when I started, there actually was an academic librarian, oh my gosh, Ed. Anyway.
Ben Gemmer?
Yes, thank you. On the board, and then he moved and ended up needing to go to be off the board. And I thought that in a lot of the conversations and deciding different policy and stuff, it's such at a sort of an zoomed out level, and people who didn't have a background in libraries often didn't understand maybe the implications fully of something, or sort of what trends were in the profession. And so just from being a member of the American Library Association and interacting with a lot of different types of librarians, it felt like sometimes when we were making choices, I could provide some insight into what the impact might be of that a little more fully than somebody that maybe just didn't have had a love for libraries but not a lot of experience in their operation.
Okay. And what is your favorite memory of the Monona Public Library?
Oh my goodness. My favorite memory of the Monona Public Library. I am going to go with that Teen Lit for Adults book club as being something that just was such a cool way to interact with the library, participated in it as how it functioned. The staff members that participate on that, it was a neat way to connect with them. But then I just also met so many people from the community, a couple of whom I knew. But you know, what a nice way then to meet people and have this common ground and to be adults talking about teen literature. I think lent itself to a different type of conversation than adults having a book club around adult, you know, nonfiction or fiction either. It was just something where it was, we experienced the books for ourselves, but then we also experienced them trying to imagine the lens of the reader they were intended for. And I think it just brought just a neat aspect to it.
Thank you. What would you tell someone that is like just moving into Monona? Based on your experience, your years of working and living in Monona, what would you tell them?
I would say to keep your eye out for that first easy opportunity to get involved, because once you meet people and start building those connections, you will be drawn into the community. But you know, when you're brand new and people maybe don't know you yet, and depending on what your occupation is, you might not meet a broad pool of people necessarily. Watching for a sign that's up looking for help clearing out a park, you know, in the spring, or whatever it might be, supporting the fundraiser, that type of thing, you know, doing something that doesn't have to be super demanding or long term, but once you start connecting with people that way, opportunities will just come to you, and you'll be able to decide, you know, how deep you want to go into it and be drawn into the community.
And finally, are there any other stories that you'd like to share that maybe I did not ask a question to prompt, but you know, whether either about yourself or the Monona community, that you're like, you know what, this is just...
Yeah, I don't know. I think, you know, all my thinking around this opportunity to share has been about how connected this community is, and how it's just such a lovely size in terms of, you know, it's not really a small town, but it is a place where you can be connected and know the people who are your neighbors and see familiar faces wherever you go. But it's also, you know, held within this larger city that sort of prevents what I feel like can be the restrictions or the isolation of a small town or city, when then it's surrounded by, you know, miles of rural, you know, it's a long haul to get to something else. So I feel like it has such a nice balance of both worlds. And if you're here long enough watching things progress, like I should have maybe said this was my favorite thing. One of my very favorite things was being on the board of trustees and having a former student, Andy Kitzler, join as the council member for the city of Monona. I mean, that was just a wonderful, I was so excited. It was really, and he's so cool that, you know, but it was so fun to have somebody who you saw as a teenager going through high school come back in this role of responsibility in the community and do such a fabulous job. So
Great.
That was a highlight too.
Well, thank you very much, Val.
Yeah, thank
really
you,
appreciate
Ryan.
it.